Right.
what a humble way to look at business, but what an amazing way to look at business
Right.
because when you put money first, um, unfortunately, if you that's what you focus on, a lot of times you don't get it. You
Right.
know,
Right. Which is weird,
absolutely,
right? Because what we focus on expands is what we're, so many of
yeah,
us are taught. But
yeah.
that can also get in the way, like you're saying, once you start to focus on that, you can lose,
Hmm.
your customer service, your quality, um, your vision, right? You can lose
Right.
because it's always the world around us is always changing. So if we're staying stagnant, people are like, oh, well, as long as I'm doing the same thing, like I'm good to go. No, 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 no.
Right.
If the world's constantly changing, you're actually declining if you're not at least somewhat growing in some form or fashion.
Hey guys, Skylar Schisler. I'm here with the Entrepreneur Theory, and I'm so excited to have our guest Chris Crary on today. But before I do that, I want to tell you about our buddy. I want to talk to you about my friend that I got to meet over the last 6 months and why I wanted to have a podcast with him. Guys, you guys came here for um, the theories and the ideas that are going to help you live out your dreams. And when I met Chris, we had known each other through a bunch of mutual friends. Like we were in the same company at one point, in a network marketing company, but we had never really broke bread. We weren't really hanging out, but we knew a lot of the same people. And it's really interesting that we both moved down to Florida, and somehow, some way, uh, we with all of our friends, we were able to link up, and he lives about an hour south of me, and we've been able to work together. We've been able to fellowship together. We've been able to have some amazing conversations. But what made me stand out with getting to know Chris is his ability to have morals and values and stick to them. In today's day and age, when somebody has a certain way of doing things, they a lot of times will compromise their values, and that's one of the things that I admire the most about Chris. Is he's been able to maintain his values through a process of living in Wisconsin and then moving down to Florida and finding new work and being able to grow his business while not basically letting his values go. The other thing that I love about him is I've worked with a lot of people in the construction industry. And when I got to spend time with him, he also does not compromise quality. So if we're building something and there's a shortcut, he's not taking it. He wants to do things the right way. And so when you think of the word integrity, I think of Chris. I think of his ability to show up and be a whole person, and not waver on his values. And that's why I value his friendship, because if I come to him outside of business, I know that he's going to give me a straight answer and there's not going to be any shortcuts, and it's going to be coming from a heart that has integrity. And so we're going to welcome our good friend Chris. He's with KCM Quality Solutions. What I love about his name, guys, is I also have Sky West Solutions. So that tells you in his business name what's in his mind. He's always looking for solutions. And so without further ado, Entrepreneur Theory, I'd love to welcome Chris Crary to the show. Thank you for joining us today.
Awesome. Hey, glad to be here, brother. And thank you for the
Absolutely.
intro. That's awesome.
Absolutely, man. It's so
Uh,
cool when I get to intro people because I get to tell them what I think about them, you know?
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's definitely. I like what you picked out. There's been some struggles along the way that's helped me kind of get to focusing more on the values and the integrity and stuff like that. It's definitely
Absolutely. But you marvel those. Like I remember
I
when we
try.
were
Yeah.
doing that Airbnb down in Cape Coral, and there was a lot of times where we had to make pieces in this cabinet situation, and you
Yeah.
were like, I want to make sure it's done right. I want to make sure that it's got good backing behind it, it's got great framing, and
Yeah.
that is you were always questioning, is the quality there?
Right. Right.
right?
Yeah. I mean,
So
that's not something you want, is that falling on somebody.
absolutely. So what I guess let's start there. Like what made you that type of guy? Like what made you seek quality over quantity?
Man, honestly, it's just something that I was born with. I don't know. I've just been doing it for so long. I don't know if there was a specific point in time where I was like, you know what, from here on, we're just going to focus on, the quality. It's just always been something like I don't have a massive operation, right? So I don't have a bunch of employees. So I feel like the fact that I'm able to control so much of the output, right? And the outcomes, that if it's not focused on quality, then it's just sloppy. You know what I'm saying? It obviously gets more complicated when you have, 150, 500 employees, whatever the case is. You're bound to have a couple hiccups here and there. But when it's just you, I really feel like there's no excuse besides human error, you know, which happens.
Well, and
Yeah.
one of the things that you and I had talked about in being a carpenter, a construction business is speed kills, right? How many times have you watched guys go too fast through a project and they end up having to do it multiple times because they're just trying to, beat the clock?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I've noticed when I go really quick, sometimes I'm like a bull in a china shop sort of deal. So like you'll go and put in these brand new fancy cabinets and you're putting in the doors, it'll be the last door. And then of course I go and, hit it with my hammer or something like that, put a big old dent in it. So yeah, slow is fast, is what I've come to learn. And most of us know that.
We've all had to learn that one
Yeah,
a
right?
time or
No
two.
matter how much
Absolutely.
you try not to. Yeah.
Dude, so I mean, tell us a little bit about yourself, man. I mean, tell us what do you want people to know about Chris?
Oh man. I guess the biggest thing. So obviously I've been married now. What, it's 11 years we've been married, been together for 13. Obviously, like most marriages, we've had our ups and downs, for sure, to say the least. But we're stronger now than we've ever been, and that's awesome, especially because now we have kids. So we have about a 3.5-year-old boy, and then we have a year-old little girl as well. So
It's awesome.
that's
Yeah, and they're
yeah,
they're so much fun. My kids love hanging out with your kids, and
indeed,
we love breaking bread with you guys. But the thing that I love the most is you talked about your family, and
yeah,
most of us that are in the business space, most of us that are entrepreneurs, we find our identity in our business a lot of times. And I love that you didn't just go,
mhm,
well, I'm a business owner and this is what I like. You didn't, even though you're on an entrepreneur podcast, like I love that you brought your family to the limelight because that's what we do it all for, right? And that's
right, right.
that's who we are as we're fathers and we're brothers and we're sons, we're daughters. Like we are more than just the work we do, right?
Right. Well, that's actually the KCM. A lot of people are like, what does that stand for? I don't understand. Well, it was originally, before we had kids, we had a dog named Kita. So it was
Mm-hmm.
Kita, Chris, and Megan. Well, once she passed away, it now became Kiddos, Chris, and Megan.
Yep.
Right.
Right.
And so, like I said, quality is what I pride myself on, and solution is what people pay me
Absolutely.
to come up with. So, yeah. So that was
So
kind of
when
the
did you
whole
start KCM Quality
intricate.
Solutions?
That was back in, what was that, 2017. So up in Wisconsin originally. Obviously, I
Okay.
dissolved that one at the beginning
Yeah.
of this year and created the LLC. Got all the articles of organization and stuff like that down here in
Absolutely.
Florida.
So
So,
you're 5 years in and you're at
mhm,
like that
mhm,
like threshold where most businesses are either going to make it or they're going to fail, right? And
right,
so you being able to go from uh having a business that was in one state and going to another state and having to basically reinvent yourself, how
yeah.
incredibly like nerve-wracking was that?
Oh man, if I didn't have faith, it would have been a lot worse. To be completely frank. That has really been the biggest thing for me, that even starting the company, it required a lot of faith. And you were saying before how I didn't jump in right away and say, oh, I'm a business owner. And that wasn't the thing that I jumped right into. Well, and honestly, the reason why is because when I first started that business, we were still in that network marketing company, right? And it had been a goal of mine since I was really, really young. My dad had always owned a business. His dad owned a business, and they're both in the construction industry. So like it was always on my heart to create my own company and be a part of that. I
Mhm.
didn't know if I was going to have employees or how that would work, but I just knew I wanted to be self-employed. Once I achieved that, I noticed that inside it was more pride and ego. I was like, yeah, I did it, you know? And it felt like I had kind of like when people get married, right? When they first get married, you're like, oh, sweet, I'm married. Well, that's it. That's this. I reached the goal. Now it's it. I'm just all downhill, right? And it was kind of like that same concept, if that makes sense,
Mhm.
where I got that. I'm like, now, like you said, that was my identity. Sweet. I finally achieved something. Now I can become somebody, right? Now I'm worthy, right? And all this. It was like, hold on, bud. Just because you have the company doesn't mean like money just doesn't start flocking in. Now the
Right.
hard work begins. You know what I'm saying? And
Absolutely.
I had to work really, really hard on my pride and my ego because I was so excited just to be a business owner that I didn't really put a lot of thought and time into, all right, here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna create these shirts and I have this many customers lined up. It was nothing like that. It honestly was, I hate my old job. I don't know what I'm doing, but like I'm just doing this and I'm gonna put all my trust in the Lord. And I just jumped right
Absolutely.
in. And so honestly, it was kind of the same thing moving down here with the company. We'd finally hit a spot up there where the hard work that I'd been putting in was paying off. And the phones were ringing. Like I was booked out for, a decent amount of time. I wasn't really worried about where the next paycheck was coming from, which was
Mhm.
awesome. And it wasn't just doing things that I was really comfortable doing. I was able to link up with a really, really great buddy of mine from high school up there. He's way more of a skilled carpenter than I am, to be completely honest. And we were able to work out a deal where he kind of helped take me under his wing a little bit. So I cut him
Mhm.
a little bit of a deal, and he kind of helped show me the ropes a little bit and kind of helped me tweak some things and fine tune um, the speed and quality and stuff like that I
Mhm.
was putting out as far as the finished carpentry aspect. And it was a bummer because we're like, do we really want to leave this? My wife had a good, comfortable job. Like, do we really want to give this up? But for years, we had wanted to move down south. And so
Right.
finally, we're just like, you know what? Once we have our baby, little baby Elena, once she comes along, that's it, man. We're out. We're gone. So we set everything up. So within 2 weeks after Meg had Elena, we were in the car and heading on down here.
Wow.
And like I said, a lot of it was faith. It was knowing that in my heart, in my soul, and same with Meg, that the Lord was calling us to something different. And he'd been doing it for quite a while, but we were comfortable. We didn't want
Mhm.
to leave that, and it seems stupid. It's like, wait, so you have two kids and you're going to go all the way across the country and both of you are going to quit your jobs essentially because I'm starting, over from scratch.
Right.
And when you look at it like that, it's not the smartest move in the world. I will agree. But it it was that confidence in the Lord. We knew that
Yeah.
he was with us, that he's got us. And ever since moving down here, that's been, very, very evident. Thankful.
Absolutely.
So
So you mentioned something that you weren't really happy with your, like, to start the company, you weren't really happy with your old job. And so as an entrepreneur, first off, what is your like definition of an entrepreneur? And then second, like, what did you realize what problem you could solve in the marketplace that would set you apart from your old job?
right, right. Well, as far as what an entrepreneur is, I honestly think that it's just somebody who's willing to go out and sacrifice it all to go for what they believe that they've been put here to do, right? But then using their skill sets to do that, if that makes sense.
Mm,
Because a lot of it
right.
is, it's not like it's any industry specific. And especially nowadays with technology, there are so many different avenues for people to, be entrepreneurs than what there were back when we were younger, you
Yeah.
know? And I really think that it's diving into what your purpose is and using your skill sets to make this place better, or to provide value to, whether it be local or just, the world as a whole, right? Whether it be your local
Right.
community or something bigger than that. And that's
Absolutely. I
honestly
want
what
to
I think it
park it
is.
here for just a quick second because I know that I asked you two questions, but you said something like you wanted to live within like what God had designed you for, right?
Yeah.
And like how many people have you met in your life that you could just tell they're not doing what they're designed to do, and like you can almost like see the hurt, or you could see um the pain of just not living that. Like Was that a
Yeah.
big relief to get into doing something that you could call your own and do it your way?
Yeah, I mean, it was, but then, like I said, once the honeymoon stage, if you will, once that wore off, and then it's like, all right, now it's time to then it was time to actually sit down and be like, all right, what's the game
Right.
plan? What are we going to do with this? And I know for us, we kind of had it set up to where I knew there was going to be a little bit of a lag or a transition
Hmm.
period, if you will, from
Hmm.
those things. And so we were able to have a little bit of money stored up to kind of help with that process. But since it wasn't a massive construction company, all I really needed was a vehicle, which I had a dependable vehicle at the time. I just had to pick up a couple new tools here and there depending on the jobs that came along. And that's
Right.
really where that capital came into play, was being able to, you know, adapt tools and stuff to the needs of the community and people around.
Like, what separates you from the other carpenter or from the other remodeler or new construction guy?
Yeah. Well, like I said before, obviously I'm not a big company, right? So it's just me. One of the things I do work really hard to do is, like I said, up there in Wisconsin, I had a good team of people essentially that I would partner up with. I had other contractors, subcontractors, whatever, that I'd reach out to if it was electrician or plumber or whatever the case was. I would just try to find a way to provide value and solve the problem that the customer had.
Right.
However that was, feasible, whether it was me or not. And so I think, like kind of what you were saying earlier about values, some people, they're so focused on the money, or they're so focused on how does this benefit me, that
Mm,
sometimes we have a natural programming to not want to help other people, right? Not want to
right.
serve people. And I believe indirectly it will come back to me. But I just do it because that's what I would want somebody to do, right? It goes back to that basic kindergarten principle: do unto others as you would have done to you, right? I mean, it's super simple. I know it's cliche, but how many
Right.
people really live like that, right? Like, how many people focus on that in the decisions that they make? And I
Absolutely.
mean, I haven't always been good at that. I'll be the first to admit I've failed many, many times. But over the years, as I've gotten older, especially with kids, man, you start to realize, what do you want to teach them? Like, what are the values? What are the characteristics? What are the things you want to pass down to them? And it really
Mm.
makes you look in the mirror and be like, oh, this needs to change, right? They start using some of the language, or they start giving you an attitude. You're like, wait, is that how I talk to you? No wonder why you're doing this. My bad, So you kind of get it.
Right.
It's a lot of self reflection. And so I think that's what really sets me apart, is that my goal is to make sure that the customer has the best experience that they can. And even if that's not with me, then hey, that's what it is. I just want to make sure that they are in good
Mm.
hands. Um, and yeah, that's kind of what I focus on.
You said
So
something that I've heard from very, very successful business owners all across the board, and that is, I want I want the customer to be happy, or I want them to have their end result, even if it's not with me. Like, what an amazing abundance mentality, right?
yeah,
Like, I know, like, you're sitting here going like, I know I have what it takes to the skills to pay the bills, right? But if I'm not the guy that you need, that's okay. I really am hoping and praying for an amazing job for you. And
yeah,
what a humble way to look at business, but what an amazing way to look at business,
right,
because when you put money first, um, unfortunately, if you that's what you focus on, a lot of times you don't get it. You
right,
know,
right. Which is weird,
absolutely,
right? Because what we focus on expands, is what we're, so many of
yeah,
us are taught. But
yeah,
that can also get in the way, like you're saying, when you start to focus on that, you can lose,
mm,
your customer service, your quality, um, your vision, right? You can lose,
right,
because it's always, the world around us is always changing. So if we're staying stagnant, people are like, oh, well, as long as I'm doing the same thing, like, I'm good to go. No, 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 no.
right,
If the world's constantly changing, you're actually declining if you're not at least somewhat growing in some form or fashion,
right,
which is, I guess, yeah, like you said, it's a different mindset. And
absolutely.
well, kind of like with that too, one of the things I've realized is if I'm trying to do it all myself and I'm relying on the money, and I'm not making, if I'm willing to take every single job that comes in, oftentimes I found that it ends up being a job that was out of my wheelhouse. I overlooked something, whether it be the estimate or something, the time that was going to go into it.
Mm,
And I end up not giving them the quality that they deserve and the customer service really that they deserve at the end of it. Because I like to actually know the people. You know, when I go and do an estimate, I'm not in there just to look at the numbers, crunch numbers, and get out. Like I want to know you. I want to know a little about your family. I want to see if we're going to be a good fit because it's me who's in your house working with you. I want to make
right,
sure that we're some people just don't jive well. You know what I'm saying?
right.
It's nothing against either party. Sometimes we just don't. And I want to make sure
Absolutely.
that
Well, and so
that's good to go. You know what I mean?
some of the people that are listening to us right now, they don't know you personally, and so I want to give a little bit of context here. Like Chris, when he
Yeah.
when he comes in and does a project, he's not going to be in your house just to do like two pieces of base. You know what I mean? Or like he's gonna just install one cabinet. Like we're talking, he's gonna be in your house for a while, and so you're gonna have a relationship there, and you're gonna to have good communication. If he's tearing out your kitchen and putting a whole new kitchen in, that is not a 1 day job. That's going to be a week or two, or maybe even a month, depending on the size and the scope. And so what he's talking about there is very, very important. I hope people are taking notes, listening to this, saying like, look, not every customer is a good fit for me, and also I'm not a good fit for every customer, because at the end of the day, I mean, when building houses, I remember we would be at a closing table signing all the docs, and we'd be handing over a house, and the homeowner's just like, good riddance. And like that's the last thing you want, right? Because
Oh
you're
yeah,
not going to
yeah.
get a referral from that person, even if
Right.
you did an amazing, immaculate job, right?
Yep. Yep.
and
Well, and I
and
don't
so
want
that's
them leaving
creating a
feeling like
brand,
it was worthless too. You know what I'm saying?
right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so, okay, so go back to the beginning. You're transitioning from a job to your business. What steps did you take to make your dream a reality? Like, how did you fund your business? What, did you already have your tools? Dude, I've worked with you. You've got every amazing gadget there is. And
I don't know
by the
about
way,
that.
folks, you can tell a lot by a man's tools, and he has top of the line everything, and that shows you the quality work he's going to output, and his organization skills. He's got a box and a way to put everything away, and I think that's amazing as well. So, anyways, how did you get to that point? Obviously, you didn't start there.
Right, right. So, kind of like I said, we had a little bit of money saved up, and then it was, man, it was just telling my wife. She honestly, my wife just got really tired of me constantly complaining about how much I hated my other job.
Right.
Um, so basically, I went in the Marine Corps, got out. Was always my goal to be in construction of some sort. That's why I went in the Marine Corps. I was a combat engineer in there, so I was building stuff and blowing stuff up, essentially, to make a long story short. And I knew that was going to get me the leadership skills and some of the discipline that I needed because before going there, man, I was not the guy that I needed to be in order to be a father, much less be a business owner, or I mean, it was borderline to even be a good person in the community as a whole. It was some rough edges,
Mhm.
to be honest. And I watched. So when I got out, it was 2008. So I was right around the financial crisis. Watched my dad kind of have his own struggles. I'm like, man, maybe I should go into something else, right? Because I watched him work for so long, he almost lost all of it. So I was like, I'm gonna go in for finance. And so I went down that route because I was like, I don't know for sure what I want to do, but regardless of what I do, finances are always a part of our life, right? Whether we're entrepreneurs or just employees, right? Because
Right.
a lot of us aren't working in our employee job
Mm.
to have that be the end goal, right? So if you can figure out how to make that money help, fund your purpose or your calling or whatever it is, outside of that, that's awesome. And so, like I said, we set a little bit up, and then I just basically said, "Hey, Meg, I got to get out of here. I got to stop." And so I got out of my desk job that a lot of people said I wasn't going to be fit to do, and they were right. I couldn't do it anymore. I hated it. It was the fact of not seeing anywhere to go up, right? It was either somebody had to die essentially for me to move up, right? Or I had to wait
Mm.
forever. And I couldn't do it. I was like, my
Right.
time is too valuable. I can't do that. Anyway, jumped in. And then
Right.
outside of that, it's a lot of YouTube University. To be honest, like it's
That's
the
awesome.
tools. Yeah, I mean the tools are changing so much nowadays. to try and figure out everything that you might need and where some of the things are that are coming out there, um, you really kind of got to be on top of that. And you really got to put in the time and effort behind the scenes
Right.
to make sure that you're coming up with the things that are going to save you a little bit of time out on the job site. And to be honest, like the first year that I was in, man, that was a huge struggle. I remember getting to a point where I mean I was making like $800 to if I made $1,200 for the month, I was killing it. Like that was a good run for me. And I was like, this is not sustainable. Like this, there's no way that this can happen.
Right.
And I had a lot of blessings, but it was a lot of my own fault that actually caused that. It was a lot of lack of discipline on my end.
Mm.
And I mean, I'm sure as you know, and we've heard from a lot of other people, getting into business, honestly, 90% of it to me is mental, right? And the 10% is the work, or, maybe it's 80/20, whatever you want to call it. But a majority of it is mental aspects and not what you're actually putting into it. And I didn't realize that. Like I knew it, but I didn't know it until I jumped
Right.
in. And
So mentally, what are you? What was the thing that was holding you back? And then when you overcame that, then what was the result?
yeah, so a lot of it was worth, like self-worth aspects. I
Mm.
didn't think I was worthy of achieving success. I didn't know if I was smart enough, to be honest. Like I knew I went to school for finance, so I was really good with Excel, and but I didn't know QuickBooks. I didn't know, man, just different investments. I didn't know how to grow a business, right? And after my first year, and when I started to see some struggles, I was like, all right, there's two options that I have right now. Well, failing was one, but I don't consider that an option. So it was either I go and pay somebody to teach me to get the skills that I need, or so like I go and get a degree, go back to school, or I find a company who is willing to basically hire me on as an employee to help teach me the skills there, right? And get so then I get hands-on experience. Plus, I'm getting what they're actually doing in the real world versus
Mm.
textbook world. And not only that, I'm not paying somebody, they're paying me, right? So now I'm getting paid to learn. And by the grace of God, I was able to kind of link up and meet a new company, which was an outstanding company. And I went and worked there. And so that actually helped give me the confidence in myself and gave me a better understanding of what I needed. And that also allowed me to go back into the business and kind of invest more into the business. But it also created a a great experience, right? I built
Mm.
a really great network out of that. And man, what I learned from there, I mean, I couldn't have got that in a 2 to 3 year time frame. I mean, I crammed this all in a very small amount of time, and the only reason why I ended up leaving essentially was because we had our son, and I just flat out told the company, I was like, "Hey, I like working for y'all, but I can't be what they need me to be based on the workload and stuff, and I can't be what
Mm-hmm.
my family needs me to be." And the values that I have are God, family, and work, and it goes in that order. And it was really tough to stick by that. You know what I'm saying? To like have, oh, here's our first kid coming along, and I'm leaving a salary job. It was, this is it. This is it's set.
Right.
And I know there were some people close to my life who definitely didn't think I was making a wise decision, shall I say. That's probably the best way to
Absolutely.
put it. And so, but I had to do, going back to what I said earlier, I had to go back to what I knew God
Right.
was calling me to do. And I knew God had me. I felt in my heart it was a choice I had made years and years ago, how I didn't want to run my business. I always wanted to be self employed, but I never
Mm-hmm.
wanted my business to take over my life and become my family, right? I didn't want that. And there's times where sometimes it does, right? There's ebbs and flows, just like there is with everything. So sometimes you do have to work a little bit, late nights, and you do have to miss a couple things here and there. But
Right.
what that's not forever, you know what I'm saying?
No.
And sometimes that is as employees, and as salary. And that's where I kind of saw it going on the other end. I didn't know how that was going to work out. And I felt like that was going to be a constant struggle. And I wasn't willing. So I just again leaped it into
Absolutely.
the arms of the Lord, I guess. I don't know how you want to put it.
Absolutely. Well, it's something that you talked about was, having having time to be a family man. And there's plenty of times during the day where, our kids have something important going on in the middle of the day, and
Yeah.
you have to break away. And if you're working at a job that expects you to be there from a certain time, to get there in the morning and then leave at a certain time, it may
Hmm.
not be the best interest to let you go. But as a business owner, what's really amazing is you can leave for a portion out of your day, right? And then
Yep.
you can
Yep.
go back and go to work. And if you've got to stay a little later to make up that time that you missed, you get to choose that. Or you
Yep.
can even put in an extra day here or there, but you
Right.
get to choose.
Yep.
And that's the amazing thing, because now you don't get to miss, a school recital or lunch with parents, or um, God forbid the kiddos get sick, right? And
Right.
so you get to be there for your family, and not saying that
Hmm.
being an employee, you're not going to be able to have that opportunity. There are still some great companies out there as an employee you can do that,
Oh, for sure.
but it's just less people you have to ask, right? And it's
Right. Right.
liberating, right? It is.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we also talked a little bit about training. How much did the military background, being in the Marine Corps, how much did that help with the process of being, a business owner? Or was there some stuff that you had to work through? Vet owned businesses are some of my favorite businesses to support, but at the same time, you guys also, have gone through a lot in your lives, and so I know that you're climbing up a hill sometimes.
Oh yeah.
And so, how important is it to support a vet-owned business as well? So there's a couple questions in there.
Yeah. Yeah. um, Man, I know one of the things was my language. I definitely had to work on that coming out. I mean, being attached to infantry, we were out
Yeah.
in the field a lot. It was kind of like construction. I mean, it was the typical. Thankfully, there wasn't a huge transition there because the construction and military oftentimes use a lot of the same language.
Right. Yeah.
But for me, it was finding out more of who I was. That's really what I got out of the military. And going into that, I learned that I put a lot of barriers on myself, right? So I mean,
Mm.
there's one thing you're going to learn in the military. It's going to push you way past the limits of what you personally thought you were capable of prior to that, right? And so, like a lot of the stuff that I had experienced overseas, for example, like I mean, there's days we were up for hours and hours and hours nonstop, or we'd have 20 minutes here, 20 minutes there. So it's really being able to know yourself and your boundaries and be able to kind of push through when you need to at times. Um, the other big thing I'd say that I really grasped from that was prioritizing. So it's
Mm.
coming up with a plan.
Yeah.
We use different terminology. I'll put it? Poor planning leads to poor performance is a good way to say it,
Yeah.
differently than how we used to say
I've
it.
heard that.
You're right, and that was one of the things. And complacency kills is another thing. So that's kind of going back to that growth mindset and always trying to adapt. I think both of those things really come into play as far as being a business owner, right? Because complacency you could replace with comfort, shall we say, right? If you start getting comfortable in where you are and what you're earning, and you start going and living outside of your means, that could be really detrimental to the success of your business, right? If you start to lose focus and start to live a little bit too much of the high life, and you're not investing back into the business in some aspect, right? Whether it be a whole new venture, maybe it's a whole other business in and of itself, which is great as well. But make sure that you're not just trying to soak up all the fruit, and reap all the benefits prior to making sure that there's something else a little bit further down the line.
Absolutely. And how important is it for us to support our former military that go into business? Because like I said earlier, those are some of my favorite businesses to support, because those are some of the most unique individuals and uh,
Yes, they are.
people, like you said, that are willing to go above and beyond if you give them the opportunity.
Right, right. Yeah, you did ask that. And I mean, I think it's really important because honestly, a lot of us have different struggles. And so our number one goal for most of us, I can't speak for all of us as far as military, but most of us, even when we're getting out, we're still serving the community. Um, for instance, like when I bought a generator earlier this year for down here, everyone's like, well, my wife said, why are you buying such a big generator? I'm like, well, what if our neighbors need it? You know what I'm saying? It wasn't just about us. I wanted to make sure that we could help be a support for somebody else in the event that something out of my hands comes up, you know? And so I think it's really important because most of us don't stop serving even when we no longer
Mm,
are, enlisted or under that. And I mean, honestly, that goes back to, biblical time. That's what Jesus has called us all to do if you really want
yeah.
to break it down, regardless of that. But I think a lot of us as vets, we have a lot more passion and we care more about quality and the end product and things like that. So for me, I think that's huge, and there's so many
Absolutely.
more obstacles that we have
Hmm.
to overcome, but most of us tend to be a little bit more focused on values and things like that. Not to knock
Absolutely.
anybody that's not, a veteran.
No.
There's obviously many out there that are fantastic outside of
Yeah.
that as well. And there's some bad veterans, to be completely frank,
Absolutely.
veteran
Well, and I've
owners as
seen
well.
it.
So
I've seen it in the marketplace. Most of the people that I've learned amazing business skills from are veterans, and it makes me go, "Gosh, I wish I would have served," because I'm wonder what I would have learned and how I could have applied it. So,
right,
there are times where I've felt left out, and
right,
but you mentioned serving and helping other people. What's crazy is you're talking about the generator, and you guys just wrote out Hurricane Ian, and now
yeah,
you're in a whole nother deal. Not only did you transition and you're what, a year and a half into living down in Florida, and now
yeah,
you're a category 5 hurricane comes through, and
yeah.
how crazy has that been, in that transition?
Oh man, there was a lot of questions that I had for God, really, to
Yeah,
say what is going on. I know you and I talked a little bit about this, and some of the men's groups that I'm part of. One at the
yeah.
church there, and then another one that you and I are a part of as well, through some veterans, and then some other just growth mindset and entrepreneurs and stuff like that. Like we're all kind of looking how can we better the community, right? And so I
Hmm.
love that group as well. And I've shared a lot of this with you guys. That's one of my recent struggles because for the past probably 3 or 4 years now, I'd say I've just been really interested in natural disasters for whatever reason. And so one of the companies that I did work for up there, we were in the restoration field. And so, granted, we didn't have natural disasters as far as like hurricanes come through. We had a massive flooding event localized up there in the Madison area a couple years back that devastated a lot of homes. I mean, it did obviously a much smaller scale than what happened here with Ian,
Right.
but very similar in a smaller uh, aspect. And I also felt this calling to share my story and help other people. And so when we came down here, I'm like, man, Lord, what are you guiding me towards? Like now Ian hits a year after we've been here. I'm like, so I'm confused. I'm like, is
Right.
this a fork in the road that I'm placing? Am I placing how do I put it, like limiting beliefs on myself and my capabilities, or how does this fit your plan, Lord? Right? And so I got a little bit of clarity on that, and so I'm just kind of trying to figure that
Right.
out. But honestly, I mean, all in all, I mean, we were blessed, and there are so many people that their lives are forever changed, and man, it just breaks my heart. And I'm glad that people like you,
Hmm.
people like me, and other men that are in our men's group, and then other people that we don't even know about yet. I'm so thankful that there are so many of us here who are really committed to staying here and helping rebuild this community. I know it'll never
Hmm.
be the same, and that honestly, I know we weren't raised here, we weren't born here. We don't understand all the memories and stuff of people who have, but honestly, I just want everybody to know, man, that we're here to help
Yeah.
rebuild in any way that we can, and
Absolutely.
really try to pour out um, the light of the Lord that on these
Hmm.
dark times for the people. Because man,
Absolutely. And
it's
so,
so
like,
important.
so the people that are, again, just meeting you for the first time, just so
Hmm.
again they have context, like you are, Hurricane Ian comes through, wipes out all communication, and there is literally no power. There's barely any water. The gas lines are 6 hours long, and you have friends that are reaching out, going like, "I need help." And so, to give context, Chris is the kind of guy that, like, look, he didn't have power, he didn't have Wi-Fi, he barely had he had a very finite amount of fuel, and he's out helping people. And what the thing happens is when a natural disaster like that happens, your true self kicks in, and you were focused on helping people rather than, well, you know what, I'm only going to go out if I make money. I'm only going to go help these people if I can
Yes.
get into their insurance and work on it, right? Through that realm, there's nothing wrong with making money through a storm, right? That's why we all have insurance and everything. But there was a lot of people that were in desperate need, and you were, hey, we're gonna go help the neighbors, and we're gonna go get them going. And that is something that is really big in business, is being able to not only generate enough money for yourself, but be have enough overflow that you can go out and help other people. So what was that
Right.
experience like, going out and even though maybe you didn't have electricity yourself, but you're out helping other people?
Right. Well, thankfully, because I was in restoration previously, a lot of my tools are battery operated. So that obviously comes in handy for
Right?
situations such as this, because then you could charge them, on the generator at night. Um, man, when you see other people in need, it's just even before the military, that was just always something that spoke to me. Like that's just always something I had a calling to. And if for those who know my son, he has a really good heart. And when we can't get him to do anything, usually we're like, "Hey, buddy, how's what you go? You want to help mommy, or you want to help daddy, or hey, can you help really quick?" And then he seems to be much more responsive. And so I don't think that's any specific, special characteristic to him. Honestly, I think we all have that. I think that's a human characteristic that some are aware of and some just aren't yet aware of, or they have other things that are blocking it, whether it be fear or greed or jealousy or something like that. Because we all come under attack by those at some point in time, as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, man, I was just glad to be able to be put in a position where I was able to do that and then still, not risk providing for my family. And so I was really humbled by that, and just grateful to the Lord for the past decisions that we had made. So
And really, at the end of the day, um you know I hate to use this term, so there's probably somebody listening is going to go, well, there's a better way to put it. So lack of a better term, it's almost like you're marketing yourself too, though, right? Like, you're going out and you're doing the right thing, and you're showing your heart. And I think that in business, that will lead more jobs. It will create more success, because your community knows that, okay, well, you know what? Chris has to make money. He has to provide for his family. But that's not the only thing. And when you have an opportunity to do something like that, I think it's very important, wouldn't you say?
yeah, oh yeah, for sure. I mean, as we get older, I mean, most of us heard it, right? As we get older, I think we as men, we're so focused at the beginning of just living life and just squeezing everything else. We make a whole bunch of stupid decisions, right? And then we say, we kind of focus on some different avenues. So now we're focused on making money. But then the cycle that I'm seeing and hearing from a lot of the conversations that I have with people and books that I read and so on and so forth, podcasts, that you listen to, as people, especially men, get older, we look for, all right, cool, now I've achieved X, right? How do I give back? I feel like that it always circles back to that, where we want to figure out a way to leave a legacy, if you will, or like what are we going to leave behind? Now that I've accomplished what I'm looking to accomplish, how can I give back and help others? And like I said, I again think it's just a natural human characteristics that we have. It's just it comes at a certain season in our life, and for everybody, it's a little bit different based on the season that they're in and the choices that they've made in the past that'll kind of determine how and when that comes along.
You're down here in Florida.
Yeah,
Hurricane Ian
loving it.
hits.
Yeah.
Prior to that, you and I were having conversations of cost of living is pretty high. The amount of money that's coming in, and what people pay for trades down here is crazy.
Yeah.
So, what are some ideas, to combat that issue? I mean, let's just kind of have an open conversation. I mean, that's probably the biggest struggle you and I have talked about. I mean, you've mentioned
Yeah,
it to me. This isn't my idea. This is something that we've talked about. Like, I remember,
for sure.
you coming to me, a local builder that wanted to have custom cabinets installed, and
Yeah.
let's be honest, what they were paying for it was very subpar from where we come from up north. So, What are some
exactly.
ideas?
Um, so it's really tough to kind of adjust to how they do things down here. It's so different than, Colorado or Wisconsin, right? Then I mean, for example, shims. They don't typically put shims on doors, and that to me blew my mind because I don't understand how that functions and doesn't fall apart a year later. That
Right.
it still swings accordingly. It's little things like that. So it goes back to what we said at the beginning. It's honestly adding value to the customer. Now, not
Right.
everybody's going to like what we have, right? But one thing I have noticed and heard and from various people who've had services done in the past or who are still looking for services or just as a general, perspective of people, they're looking to have the same person that comes out to do the estimate be the same person that comes back and does the work and then is also the one that kind of does the invoicing because what from what I've gathered, a lot of people start to have a little bit of mixed emotions with that and mixed experiences, right? They'll have somebody come out very nice. They'll come out and kind of talk with the person originally, get a scope of the work, and then create the estimate. And then all of a sudden, somebody else is showing up at their door, and they're like, "Whoa, who's this?" And sometimes that's not always communicated, right? And obviously, the more cogs you put in the wheel, the more likely that something is going to get lost in translation. It's just more opportunity for mishaps to happen if you don't have, a good system set in place. And that's one of the things that I like is yes, I am a little bit higher priced than some of the other people. But there was one situation that I was working at where this individual considered himself to be a painter and he painted. The customers were extremely unhappy with that. And this individual said he'd put many layers of paint on. They still didn't like it. The homeowners actually painted a whole nother room within this condo themselves. And then basically came to me like, hey, we know you're basically I was almost double the price. And they're like, hey,
Mm,
we want to make sure that it gets done right the first time. Can you just do this for us? We understand, but we can't leave it like this, and we don't have time to
right.
do it. So they paid me to do it. And at the end of it, he's like, honestly, your painting is second to none, which I was very humbled to hear that. I don't know if I necessarily agree, to be honest. Like I'm not a professional painter, but
Right.
either way, I'm just glad that they were extremely happy. I did like I do with everything. I just did my absolute best. And if it's not something that I would like, which I'm extremely picky,
Right.
in most cases, I'm just a perfectionist. And sometimes that actually most of the time that drives me bonkers. I'll be honest. Same with my
Mm,
wife,
yeah.
but that's just what it is. I believe that's just how I'm wired. And so that's what I try to do. If I wouldn't
Absolutely.
be happy with it, even though I can't see it from my house, it will literally haunt me at night. If I do something wrong, it will keep me up at night and I have to be able to sleep.
Well, I think you just hit the nail on the head. So when you're trying to find your place in a new market,
Mhm.
something that you mentioned is like, look, well, and we mentioned in this podcast is you're not going to compromise your prices, you're not going to compromise your integrity, and so if they're not a good fit, then move on. But we've been finding, we've done a couple houses down here ourselves, and
Mhm.
we've been finding that Florida work is a lot cheaper, but the work is so subpar. It's very jinky. It's very incomplete, and it's very basic.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I think that's really interesting is almost everybody who's seen your craftsmanship, or in our projects, we brought the northern craftsmanship down, and people are like, "I want that."
Yeah.
And so I think you just hit the nail on the head. It's just you just keep that course steady and true, and you know your self-worth, you know what it will take to get the job done,
Yep.
and some will have and some won't, right?
You remind me of something. What I forgot about was, which I'm sure you've heard many times. So people will call somebody to show up and they'll show up, but they'll come for like a half a day and then,
Mm,
or they'll show up at like 10 in the morning. They'll take off at 11 because they realize they forgot something or don't have something. So they'll go to the store. They'll come back at 2 o'clock if they come back that day at all. And it's very sporadic, right? They're not dependable. And so that's one of the things that you're paying with when, for me too, if I tell you that, hey, this is the day I'm going to be there, this is the day I'm going to be there. Now, I'll be honest, there are times where I'm, 5, 10 minutes late. I have
Yeah.
kids. I do my best to be there on time, but my wife does a lot. Like she helps out so much. And honestly, I wouldn't be able to do a lot of this without her on my side. And I know she doesn't get enough recognition for that at all. And if it's going to take me an extra 5 or 10 minutes on my end in the morning to make her rest of the day a little bit easier, then I try and do that. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Because I feel like
definitely.
that's the least that I can do for her. I don't know if it's always that's how it, it pans out, but that's my intentions.
Right.
So yeah, but that's the thing that you're paying for, right? If I say I'm going to be there, I'm showing up. And like you said, I'm going to stay. If I have to come in on Saturday, that's also a really common thing down here. Is a lot of people work on Saturdays, and I feel like that wasn't as common up north. You basically work Monday through Friday in construction, and that was kind
Right.
of it. I don't know how that is in Colorado if that's the same,
Well, I think
but
a lot of people in Florida like to dip out early so they can get on the water, and
yeah,
so they have to work a Saturday.
yeah, or I mean,
I
yeah,
mean,
whatever it
the
is,
culture is completely different down here, right? It's
for
like
sure. Well,
it's been a learning curve to say the least, right?
yeah, yeah. Well, and one of the things I worked with another crew for the first month we moved down here, and every day at lunch they drank. I mean,
Mhm.
it wasn't like I mean, they weren't doing like keg stands and stuff like that, right? They weren't getting
Right.
smashed, but they were drinking, and it wasn't a thing just to be like, no, no, I'm good. I would tell them, no, no, I'm good all the time, and sure enough, they'd be here, and they'd open it up and hand it to me. I'm like, "Oh, dude." And then you don't feel like a man, and then you feel like you're being a sissy, and then you get picked on, a little bit, and they kind of poke at you, right? Just to aggravate you. And
Yeah.
obviously, that didn't take long for me to be like, "Yep, this isn't a good fit. We're out. This isn't happening anymore." And
Right.
so that crumbled. But I think that's a lot of it too. Is that seems to be for whatever reason that seems to be part of the culture down here, and that's very taboo. Um, at least in Wisconsin, to do that
100%.
after hours. That's a whole nother story, right?
Right.
And, but in most cases, but yeah, at lunch, no, no, that's just not what you do.
Absolutely.
And
When you just pointed out a story, like, you are who you hang out with, right? And
mhm,
so
mhm,
if you're on a job and everybody's drinking, sure, you may not be the one that's drinking, but you're associated with that work, right?
yep,
You're associated with
yep,
that group. And I just want to, give you a pat on the back for sticking to your morals and values again. Like that's something that I think is very consistent in Chris's life is his ability to go, this doesn't jive with who I want to be. And how awesome is that? Like you are literally writing your own script to your life.
yeah. And I mean, honestly, to at that time I did drink on the job. I'd have a beer or something most days. Every now and then I wouldn't. So kind of going back to that, to be completely honest, like I wasn't always consistent in it, right? And even in the past, there's a lot of people I'm sure that'll hear this later on that knew me from way back in the day, and I haven't always been consistent. And
Mm-hmm.
that's just straight up. It's not. And after years and years of making mistakes and taking the hard route, it's chipped away at my pride and ego, and it's really just like, man, wisen up. You know what I'm saying? Like, what are you doing? Why do you keep making the same stupid mistakes? Like, just if you know it doesn't work, just take
Mm-hmm.
confidence in that and just be like, this is who I
Absolutely.
am. This is what it is, and move forward. And if the crowd that you're around isn't okay with that, and they'd rather keep you as the buddy who's fun because you go out and drink and you do stupid stuff. Okay, well, fine if that's what you want to do, but realize what you're sacrificing. You're sacrificing you. You are taking away a part of you to do that, and it's taken me many years to realize that. And now, I mean, to be completely honest, I don't even drink at all, and I
Right.
haven't since March or February of this year, whatever it is. And that journey in itself is for another podcast. I won't go down that rabbit hole. I can talk
Right.
about that all day. But I mean, honestly, the benefits from that and the rewards are just endless. It keeps giving essentially. I keep finding new
Absolutely.
reasons to why I'm so thankful that I finally listened to my internal instincts and were just like,
Mm-hmm.
no, no, and I finally had it under control too, which was one of the weird things. Um, I finally had it under control. I didn't have a problem necessarily, but even then, I still felt like, no, no, it's not serving you, and that's ultimately what it came down to. It's not serving you, so I gave it up.
Absolutely. So you mentioned, you gave your wife a great shout out. How important is it to have a spouse that is
Oh
supportive?
man, it is. You can't really put it into words. Honestly, I really can't. Looking back on where we've come as a couple, man, like I'm just so humbled. I'm so grateful that I'm really grateful for so many ways.
It's so my wife I remember when I was younger and I started my first business and I was 18, 19 years old. And I told my wife, I'm an entrepreneur and I'm going to stay out late at night and I'm going to be working all the time. And, if that's what you want to marry, that's who I am.
Yep.
And I definitely lived up to those words in not the best way. And
Right.
what was crazy is I was so mean to my wife, to the point
Same.
that like I would be like, "You're not supporting me," but she was always there. She was always in the background,
Yep.
making things work when I didn't expect them, or I was too egocentric to really understand that she was really supporting me. And so when you say you can't
Right.
put it into words, I know that you're going back and probably playing a lot of those
Oh
moments in
man.
your mind of like, oh, if I would have just paid attention, she was there for me, you
Right. Right.
know?
And without going into too much depth, just because it is
Yeah.
a very convoluted story in many cases, to make a long story short, I haven't, a lot of the stuff can't really go to her, right? A lot of it falls on me ultimately. I mean, if you look at the biblical aspect of it, we as men are called to be the leaders of the home. Now, that doesn't mean that the woman is less than, right? Which I think a lot of people get mixed up.
Right.
My wife, is definitely anything but less than. Um, but me being, quoted the leader in the home, biblically speaking, I wasn't doing that. Like, so
Mm.
the reason why when I first started the business, she's like, why do you really need this tool? Like, that used to be a pretty decent conversation that we would have, because I was like you said, I was constantly coming in with new tools, right? Because I am a one-man band for the most part, unless I work, with another subcontractor. And that being the case, I'm always looking for ways to cut corners without cutting quality, right? And so cutting corners as far as time, I want to be in and out as soon as I can be with as little mess as possible and in fewer trips,
Right.
because fewer trips that I take is more time on the job. That's less
Absolutely.
time with my family. That's more time inconveniencing to other people. And so I try to be cognizant of that. And she'd be like, why do you need this? Why do you need this? Why, and it's really hard to explain to somebody that isn't there on the job all the time. And we didn't have that trust built. And rightfully so, quite honestly. Looking back, like I said, I was not the man that I needed to be. I was not the husband. I was not the friend. And I was not the eventual father that I, was looking to become at that time. And
Absolutely.
I wasn't living in alignment with the Lord. I wasn't living in alignment with my morals and my values and my principles. And that's why I put such a big priority on them now, is because I've seen the repercussions of not doing that. And
Right.
I don't want to go back to that. She deserves better than that. My kids deserve better than that. And ultimately, the Lord's called me to serve better than that. So why would I waste time? Like, that's the most valuable commodity that we have. And any day that I'm going out, any hour that I'm going out, and I'm not being a good steward, I'm not focusing on those things, that's an hour, that's a day that I lose, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I don't get that back. If you lose 500
Right.
bucks, you can go make 500 bucks, but you can't ever get that time back. And so and because I've failed so much in the past, as far as, or falling short, however you want to look at it, of being a good example of a father, a husband, um, a man of God, I want to focus more on that now and make sure that I'm in congruency with that moving forward. And that's why I put such a big stink on it.
You've said three major things today that like I want to point out, and then I'm going to ask you what you want to elaborate on, or if there's something else you want to add. But like, you may not have said this, but you implied you live a life by your own design. You get to make your own choices, who you work for and how you get to act in every situation. Are you going to serve your customer? Are you going to serve money, right? That is a very important message, and I hope that people that are listening are gathering that is what you said today, in
Yeah.
many different ways. But
Yeah.
it's very it's very humbling to hear you say that, because ultimately, most people that are in business for the right reasons think a lot like you, and you said it very well. The other thing is self worth. I mean, I don't know how many of
Man.
us have dealt with imposter syndrome. I mean, b-
Mm-hmm.
launching this podcast. Am I good enough to do a podcast? You know what I mean? I've
Right. Right.
we've ran companies and we've built houses and we've done all these things. But can I operate a computer screen, right?
Right.
um, and the other thing is like, listen, guys, if you're a brand new owner, or you're getting ready to get into being an entrepreneur or starting a business, or create an invention or something, be careful who you choose in your journey. Your spouse is a very big part of what you do. Like, a lot of people don't
Mm-hmm.
realize that when you become married, by the way, which is a Christian thing, which means that you are going to be wed under God, and you are going to be intertwined as one. So he is she, and she is he, as you guys are the head of your household, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so when you make a decision, it affects her. And when she
Oh
makes
yeah.
a decision, it affects you, right? And
Yeah.
so to have a great spouse in growing your business is just as important as having the best
Mm-hmm.
invoicing software or the best tool on the job, right?
Oh
Because
yeah.
if you don't have somebody at home that you trust, um, you're not going to be your best at work, right?
Oh yeah. Correct.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
are any of those, you want to elaborate on any of those, or is there something else that you want to add in your journey before we wrap up this podcast?
Yeah. I guess, yeah, one of the things that you had asked before is, or like one of the questions actually that you had, you said, what is your biggest success to date? Right.
Mm,
And that was in like the questions that you sent in the email.
yeah, absolutely.
And originally I wrote, I had achieved just under 100K in a year, right? Like just shy of. And then I actually crossed that out. Like after a couple seconds, I crossed that out. I was like, no, 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 no. That's not true. Um, for me, it was actually staying consistent and always doing my best to be in alignment with the Lord, right? My
Mm,
biggest achievement was that, but that ties back in with the self-worth aspect. Okay. So like I said, that was a huge struggle, and that came up because what's down in the well comes up in the bucket sort of deal. Many of us have heard something like that or similar.
right.
And yeah, our internal worlds are always going to affect our external environments as far as I'm concerned. Um, whether it be good, if you have bad stuff down here, it's going to externally make things bad, and if it's good in here, it'll externally be good, I think. And
Right.
um, one of the big adventures, I guess, that my wife and I are kind of on now. So my wife has her own marriage coaching. She's felt really called to do that. And so we're kind of focused on trying to get that launched. And she's got quite a few other things that she's working on. And then also I've actually had this created now for almost a year. And it's a YouTube channel where I feel God has called me to share my story. So much like we're doing right now today, it's very similar concept, but it's diving a little bit more deeper into different obstacles that I've had in my life, what I've
Absolutely.
learned from them, how having a marriage and being self-employed has really played out. Some of the earlier struggles, how the Bible's
Mm,
played out for us, the people that we surrounded ourselves with, the podcasts, the books, all that stuff. There is not one specific thing. I mean, besides the Lord itself, outside of that, there's not
right.
one specific thing that's really benefited us. It's a multitude of things,
Mm,
and it's not reading this book today and then, oh, that's it, cool, man. Like I'm good. I've read 3 books on leadership. I'm an expert. No, no, it's never the case. It's always consistently having that growth mindset to continue to dive in to future things. Do your best to find the good in every situation. You know what I'm saying? Like, man, and I know it's such a cliche thing to say. I do understand that, but it ties in so much to the self worth. Man, there are so many times in my life that if I would have had a little more confidence in who I was, and if I would have quit hanging on to the mistakes that I had made and allowing those to become my identity and really hold me back from where I was going. Oh, man, had I allowed those to actually win, I wouldn't be here right now. Like, there's so many things in my life. I don't even know if I'd be here at all, quite frankly. Part of me, I really don't think I would be, just because of my personality and the choices that I was making. And instead of looking at those things as being failures, as we often do, right? Look at them as, what can I learn from this? And then it's only a failure if A, we don't learn from it, and if B, we don't turn that into something better. We always
Right.
can, right? And there's still days where I do things that I wish I wouldn't, whether it be a negative thought or something I say. But don't beat yourself up about it, man. It's going to happen. And like,
Right.
that's been the big journey this year, is self-love, which I never even really focused on that before. And that's what I'm saying. When you find the good in every situation, you'll get back to finding healing. You'll
Right.
get back to that self-love. And then, in my opinion, once you keep that focus on the Lord above, because we're always going to make mistakes. And when we can keep it on somebody above us, that focus, that attention, that A, takes a lot of weight off of ourselves. And
Right.
I've struggled a lot with identity. And finding identity in Christ has really helped me, A, stay grounded, stay focused, give me that solid foundation to move forward, and
Right.
then allow me to be able to set aside those failures, to set aside that
Mm.
identity that oftentimes we get associated with those mistakes. It's allowed me to set those aside and really love myself and accept myself for who I am, and then get the positive feedback from those situations, and be able to apply it back to the community, back to my family, and turn it into a really positive thing. And and I'm so grateful for that. And so, yeah, the YouTube channel that we just started, is This Crary Life, kind of a pun on This Crazy Life, was kind of the whole point behind that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, for anybody who's interested, obviously check us out on there. Subscribe if you'd like to. It's like I said, just starting out, so we've had it for a year, but we just put the intro video on there. I
Yeah.
think it was last week or the week before. And I've got a few more things that I'm working on. A bunch of content up here, a bunch of voice recordings and stuff like that, of stuff that I want to dive into.
Yeah.
It's just finding that time, kind of like you're doing now. It's finding
Yeah.
that time to kind of shift, and then still be able to, provide for my family, and then help the community around and stuff like that. So, other
Absolutely.
ways you can connect with me are on Instagram. It's Chris_Crary, and then Facebook it's just Chris Crary. Crary is the last name.
Hmm.
And I'm not really active on there. If you see that, you'd be like, wow, this dude isn't really doing much. And yeah, I mean, that's true. I'm more old school in that fashion. I like what we're doing right now, right? I like
Right.
face-to-face conversations. I
Right.
like shaking people's hands. And so I'm still kind of shifting and adapting, and seeing how I can use social media as a valuable tool to make a better impact on not only the
Absolutely.
community here, but at the world as a whole. And just share the gospel and what it's done for me in my life. And hopefully, if I can help anybody make even half the mistakes I've made in my life, that, hey, that's a win. But yeah, I mean, that's it, I guess, on
Absolutely.
my end. If
Well,
you got anything
you
for me,
guys
let me
heard it
know.
from the man himself. Chris, you did an amazing job today, and I love what you had to share. And I
Thanks,
wish we
brother.
had more time together, which we're definitely gonna have you come on, and we're gonna definitely want an update of what's happened, since Ian and all that. I know right now everything's still kind of fresh, even though we're only a month afterwards. But
Yeah,
I want to see where KCM, Quality Solutions grows, and where this
yeah,
Crary life goes, and where you grow into. But the one thing that
yeah,
I want to leave people with is he's his own entity, guys. And he kind of talked a little bit about some income. Keep in mind, I've said this from stage multiple times. You can pay me $150,000 a year to do a job that I hate, or I can pick to do a job I love and work with the people I want to work for, and I will settle for 50,000 a year. Why? Because I'm doing what I want to do. Because
yeah,
I am operating in the path and the grace that God has given me, right?
for
And
sure.
you are the example of that, brother. Like,
Try to be.
you are doing it. And
Yeah,
the only thing is, you just need more time, and it'll just collect more, and you'll serve more. And it's amazing to see, what you've done in 5 years. And this is just the surface of what you've done, talking with you today. But 6 months time or whenever we have you back on, I know that when people listen to you again, they're going to be like, wow, God is moving in this guy's life. He's moving in the right direction, and there's a lot of big things happening. And that's why I wanted to have you on the podcast, is because you're in the middle of the come up, you're in the rise.
Right.
And what's awesome is being able to watch that. And it couldn't happen to a better family and a better man and a better idea company, because you deserve it, man. So thank you for coming
Thank
on
you, brother.
today. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your service as a veteran in the Marine Corps. Thank you so much for that, because without you, we wouldn't have this beautiful life. So we appreciate you and the men and women who have served so much. So, guys, as you heard, I will have all the links to where you need to reach out to Chris. And, if he struck a chord with you today, don't hesitate to reach out. He's an
Yeah.
amazing man of God, and he's amazing to talk to. So thank you so much for your time.